Ranjan, and over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we will be bringing you the biggest headlines from the world of business, finance and economics. So we begin with a story that we've been closely tracking for the last month or so. It was just last month when Go First, the domestic carrier, filed for bankruptcy proceedings. Bear in mind, voluntary bankruptcy proceedings. And now, just a month later, it looks like Go First might have just secured funding of over 400 crore rupees. Some media outlets say it's 425 crores, while others say 450 crore rupees. This new round of funding has been approved, has been given an in-principle nod by Go First's creditors or lenders, and now all that's awaited is an approval from the boards of the banks in question. And if everything goes off smoothly, we're looking at Go First taking to the skies again by the month of July. At least that's what it's looking like. Let's try to understand the story better. Karthik Malhotra has been tracking this very closely. Karthik, talk to us. Everybody's waiting with bated breath. We need Go First back in the skies. But from what I see, what we have right now is speculation, but good, positive speculation.
Part speculation, part fact. Fact that yes, there has been an approval from at least 3 creditors that we know of. This includes IDBI Bank, Bank of Baroda and Central Bank of India. These 3 creditors have decided that they are going to approve the fresh infusion of upwards of 400 crore rupees. 425, 450, we don't know, both numbers are floating right now. This actually is in addition to the already 6,500 crore rupees that Go First owes to its creditors. So actually its books are going to swell up by another 400, 450 odd crores, taking it close to about 7,000 crore rupees on its books. Now,
Ouch.
That is a big number, right? So at what point is Go First, even if it were to resume operations in July, as is being reported right now, how much time before Go First flies into profitability and flies into getting rid of all the debt on its books? So that, of course, is going to be a long-haul flight for Go First, and I think a red-eye one at that. But what we know for sure is that Go First has got a fleet of 22 aircraft which are serviceable, flyworthy, they can be taken off, right? And about 78 routes can be flown using these 22 aircraft. So Go First has been at least alluding to the fact that it wants to take off quickly. There has been a change of the IRP, the interim resolution professional. Shailendra Ajmera is the person who's drafted out this new roadmap for Go First to take off. And things are looking a little better than what they were looking before we went into the weekend. And of course, as you said, 2nd May is when Go First filed for voluntary insolvency. Unlike SpiceJet, which is being forced by lessors into involuntary insolvency. So Go First was a little smarter, was a little quicker in understanding that there is a financial crunch and we have a problem with engines that have grounded 50% of our fleet, Pratt & Whitney US engines, which have grounded about 50% of its fleet, due to which the financial crunch is going to become even more severe. So it decided to go in for voluntary insolvency. And thereafter, successively every week, it kept cancelling its scheduled flights for the next week, for the next 3 days, for the next 10 days, and so on. Now we don't have a cancellation for the month of July. And if that doesn't come out this week, then it definitely seems like Go First is going to take to the skies sooner than perhaps, mid of July. But of course, people who will not be happy with this, of course, we are going to rejoice, because flight tickets that we want to book out of our own money, not really company travel, is hopefully going to become less expensive. Because if you remember, airfares have been shooting as high as 3x, 4x, even 5x. So of course, consumers like us, flyers like us, are going to breathe a sigh of relief. But I don't think it's great news for the Tata, Vistara, Air India combine, as well as Indigo, which have happily chomped away at Go First's share of skies, and the 6.8 to 7.5% market share that Go First had up until end of April 2023 has been beautifully eaten away by, in a large chunk, by Indigo, and a close second being the Tata, all the airlines and the Tata stable combined. So together, these 2 airlines are pretty much commanding a duopoly in the market, which is shooting up prices, and they have upwards of 85% of market share right now.
Right. And my question is, at this stage, is very simple. Demand has only been growing and growing in the post-pandemic world.
Absolutely.
We are officially in the post-pandemic world. The World Health Organization has officially declared that the COVID-19 pandemic is not a critical threat anymore.
That's right.
In the post-pandemic world, we're looking at air travel, domestic air travel getting back to pre-pandemic levels, if not higher. And some of the numbers so far in this year have shown the fact that we're either back at pre-pandemic levels or domestic travel has possibly grown, during the course of the pandemic. Yep. And so, in that sense, another airline, and plus you're looking at the rebrand and relaunch of the entire Air India group, all of this should augur well for as far as meeting the increased demand for air travel in the country is concerned, Karthik.
Absolutely, you're right. So there is demand almost touching the pre-pandemic levels. We aren't there yet, but remember, pre-pandemic is also 2019 until when we had Jet Airways also flying. Right. So 2019 was a major milestone and a dark one at that for Indian aviation, where Jet Airways actually got grounded and it's yet to take off. But coming back to the demand function, of course, demand and supply both need to work in tandem. And what is really happening is that because of the shortage of supply, with airlines like Jet Airways being grounded for over 4 years and Go First also not in operations for the last 2 years.
And many of the smaller ones like Carnival,
Paramount, many of them have pretty much landed and haven't taken off. Now, and you've had entry of, let's say, Air Akasa,
yes,
which is not flying too many sectors still, right? And it has a much smaller fleet as compared to the large domestic carriers. So what really happens is, in this era where the demand for travel is high, but supply is not able to meet that demand, the price equilibrium is being met at a much higher point, which means ticket prices have become expensive because there is as much demand as there was 3 years, 4 years ago, but supply has dwindled drastically. And this means that the price economics are going to get met at a much higher plane in the price graph.
Karthik, that's the reason why I kept asking you this question, because, whether Indigo's market share gets eaten away or, Air India, as far as you and me and all those watching this is concerned, we're just waiting for some sanity when it comes to, air ticket prices, because, I know people, Karthik, who are just converting their domestic holidays into international holidays because some of those routes end up being cheaper, because we're back in the middle of travel season, holiday season at the end of the day. And True. I know it for a fact that some people have changed, domestic destinations to a Southeast Asian country or Dubai or one of those, because they're able to get a sane airfare. Even you took a holiday out of the country recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Hong Kong, but yeah, unfortunately, the tickets were as expensive, if not more expensive, than what the Delhi-Leh air tickets were costing soon after Go First landed. So prices for the Delhi-Leh sector, which was a frequent sector for Go First, were as expensive as about 36,000 rupees.
That's a ticket to Hong Kong.
That's almost a ticket to Hong Kong. So I paid about 40,000 for my ticket to Hong Kong. But yeah, if you were to look at, let's say, Delhi-Ahmedabad, which is flying at about 22,000 rupees right now, it could easily get you a ticket to Bangkok.
Exactly. And also the problem with Delhi-Ahmedabad route, Karthik, since I've flown this route several times, is that there are no flights at a decent time in the morning. All the flights are 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, and they all cost 20,000 rupees upwards. True, and I was like, what am I paying for in the first place? Not even a decent time to take the flight.
So don't look west, look east. You should have flown to Bangkok instead.
Well, I'm just hoping, with this discussion, post this discussion, in a couple of weeks from now, we'll be discussing how soon we can get a Go First ticket. How soon Go First will come back into our apps, and we have that option, and prices start rationalizing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're keeping a track of that. We'll soon tell you how soon you can start comfortably booking your domestic air travel tickets. But I'm afraid we'll have to sort of wrap up this story and move on to another one. We've got a very interesting story lined up for you, and that has to do with India's largest and most valuable IT services company, TCS. There has been a recruitment scam at TCS, or rather, a scam that has been found out by the company itself. 4 top officials from the global recruitment team of TCS have been sacked. The head of global recruitment at TCS has been asked not to come to office. And some say that the scam could be worth 100 crore rupees. That's right. The story here is very simple. Officials from TCS's enterprise resource hiring group have taken bribes from staffing contractors to prefer certain staffing firms over other. and they are said to have made more than 100 crore rupees. But the story here is very simple. TCS itself, the company itself, has identified this problem and has sacked all 4 of those individuals. Karthik, and that's the most important thing at this stage, isn't it? Because people can look at it as a scam, people can look at it as a problem. The thing is that TCS is looking at something that is a systemic problem, because you have a person who's dealing with, or a team that is dealing with many staffing recruitment firms. They're all recruiting en masse. TCS recruited 300,000 people last year, over the last couple of years. So talk to us in terms of the virtue that you're able to see in this, because I'm able to see a virtue because you have the company itself coming out and confidently saying this. How many other companies are going to do this?
So, Krishna, first things first, it wasn't something that got discovered in the internal audits done by TCS or any of its auditors. This was a problem that emerged after a whistleblower wrote to the newly appointed CEO and the existing COO, suggesting that there is a problem of bribes for jobs, which is ongoing in what is mentioned in TCS and in the reports as the RMG, which is a resource management group.
Yeah.
Now, the resource management group, what TCS has written, of course, to give it to TCS, it acted as soon as the whistle was blown and they knew that there is something worth investigating, and the investigation was done internally, and hence TCS has written to the market regulator and to the bourses clarifying its stand on the subject. So yeah, there was a corporate governance issue at TCS. That issue apparently escaped the eyes and ears of the management until it took a whistleblower to write to the CEO and COO suggesting the problem, and thereafter TCS acted. So a virtue, yes, a virtue built on an ongoing vice would be how I would possibly look at it.
But it's funny that I'm going to stop you right here before you move any further. You're telling me that a whistleblower was the one who found this out. A whistleblower had a safe pathway to expose this to the highest of authorities and still be protected and still for the problem to be fixed. I see virtue in that too.
I agree. Yeah, so there is virtue, but there was an ongoing vice which led to all of this hullabaloo around the scandal, so to speak, or the scam, so to speak. Now, RMG, as per TCS's statement, the resource management group that we were talking about, TCS states that it is not responsible for direct recruitment of employees. That function is taken by TCS independently. The HR, the talent function within the HR group at TCS does it separately. Now, E.S. Chakravarti is a gentleman who has been alleged as one of the perpetrators of this bribe for job scam at TCS. He was heading RMG. Now, TCS suggests that RMG is a function which pretty much looks at resource fitment across various live projects. So, where to pick up staff from within the organization, assign them to a certain live project, and wherever there is a deficit, contractually hire more people. I think that is where the problem really surfaced. So, these are apparently not permanent employees being hired by TCS, rather contractual employees being picked up by RMG through multiple recruitment agencies, which pick up project-specific contractual employees from outside of the TCS ecosystem, place them as freelancers in a certain project till as long as that project lives. Now, apparently, that is where the scandal really took place. And of course, E.S. Chakravarti himself has been sent on leave.
He's been asked not to come to office.
He's been asked not to come to office. Now, is that permanent? Is that temporary? I think it is temporary until the investigation goes on, and thereafter it may become permanent, or he may be absorbed if he's absorbed of any wrongdoing in this whole scandal. But yes, 4 other senior executives from the RMG have been sacked. And 3 agencies, I don't know the names of those agencies yet, but 3 agencies which were providing these contractual staffers to TCS have also been blacklisted. Right. So the story is going to unfold even further, and this comes about a week after TCS just secured one of its largest deals, which was I think $100 million, a $1 billion deal from the United Kingdom to redo the interfaces of UK's pension system. And this was a 10-year project. And we were hoping to see some uptick in TCS stocks, which did not come because overall the IT sector was down last week. But there are mammoth global projects being taken by India's largest IT services company. And if nothing else, it's definitely a dent on the goodwill of TCS, and it doesn't send a great message outside to those who are outsourcing work to TCS that these kind of scandals are happening in 2023.
Right. Karthik, the one thing I wanted to ask you is this. This also, I mean, you're talking about a big IT company, it's contracting, its staffing requirements to multiple agencies, and these companies also do the same thing for other IT companies in the country.
Right.
So the question here is that, has it been first found at TCS?
Opened a can of worms?
Exactly. My question here is that, is it TCS the first one to have, opened the can of worms, dealt with it and moved on, whereas the other ones are still sitting on it?
Quite possible. Quite possible. I mean, it doesn't seem a great story. It doesn't seem like something you would want coming out in the papers. But yeah, it could very well be a can of worms which has just popped open, and God knows what flows out of it.
And Karthik, bribes for jobs is the kind of stuff that you would read in a general newspaper headline with regard to a state government jobs or a central government jobs. It is extremely shocking that a company known for its values and values of how well it operates. It's and the size of the company, the value of the company. It's incredible that it was quite shocking that this even came out. But how would you rate the reaction that you've seen over the course of the weekend as well to this entire scam? From other stakeholders that would you think that they still think that TCS is under a cloud, or do you think that TCS largely remains Teflon coated because of the way it is reacted to what is going on?
See, not too many reactions came over the weekend, Krishna. I think all we got was the company statement. First, of course, on Friday we had the whistleblower complaint, and then over the weekend you just had the company trying to make amends and the company trying to proactively deal with the situation. But yeah, I mean, IT companies in India, the blue chip companies, the world over, not just in India, have a coat of Teflon on them. So they become very, very difficult to penetrate through and add corrosion to or rust. Now,
unlike the Titan submersible.
Yeah, exactly. Now, will it really dent the business of TCS? Maybe not immediately, but I think once goodwill is something that all blue chip companies really wear as a chip on their shoulders. So if the goodwill gets dented, I think improving on that factor alone, apart from the business financials, the numbers, is something that that becomes difficult to wipe off, despite the Teflon coating. But would it be scratch free, and would the entire IT pack or the entire blue chip pack be scratch free? I don't think so. We've seen, not just in IT, we've even seen outside of IT, companies like Adani going under the scanner. We've seen the Sony Z deal going under the scanner, so these are scandals, these are scams that, unfortunate as they may be, surface every now and then, and I think it's completely on the company, on the ethos of the company, on the very principles of foundation that the company is built on, to deal with these challenges head on and emerge stronger with better corporate governance, with better processes in place, and hopefully allaying any fears of such scandals rocking the boat again.
All right, hopefully not. And from the way TCS has reacted to the scandal ever since it broke out, I have some confidence that Karthik, TCS will be able to do enough damage control and regain all the lost goodwill. But time now to move on and away from that story to another very interesting story in which all of you watching are involved. All of you out there watching this broadcast live with credit cards and credit card dues. Because for the first time in India's history, the credit card dues of Indians has crossed the 2 lakh crore rupee mark. That's right, 2 lakh crore rupees. Indians owe more than 2 lakh crore rupees on their credit cards. And that's for the month of April 2023, as of the month of April 2023. And it's a near 30% growth from the same period last year, as in April 2022. But the fact of the matter is that less than 5% Indians own a credit card. So what exactly is going on over here? Karthik, less than 5% Indians own credit cards, more than 2 lakh crore rupees. And now the third category, it's in terms of the overall dues, loan, personal loan category. Now you have housing loans, auto loans, and credit cards. And the percentage of credit card dues in that pie has just doubled.
Yeah, so Krishna, I don't know how to look at this story. I'll tell you my initial observations. Up until now, whenever we saw a surge in credit card spending in the economy, it was a sign akin to, let's say, the Industrial Revolution and smoke billowing out of chimneys across the US. it was a sign pretty much akin to that hey, there is demand in the economy, there is consumption happening in the economy. And credit cards used for white goods, high value purchases, involved purchases, sort of, reflected the sentiment that the economy is growing and there is consumption for whatever is being produced, and that consumption is being met by individuals who are buying those products and services using credit cards. Now there's another way to look at it, and the other way to look at it is there are 2 lakh crore rupees due which people are purchasing on credit rather than on cash. 2 lakh crore rupees worth of goods and services have been purchased in the economy, perhaps because people were unable to pay for them using their debit cards. So you've got to look at the story in both sides and try and discern for yourself which is the story you want to believe. And unfortunately, I believe whatever economic growth we have seen has not come on the back of consumption. The economic growth, the GDP figures that we see every day, and we are all proud of them, those pretty much suggest that the GDP growth has come on account of government spending and on account of investments, not on account of consumption. So consumption is being driven largely on credit, and that to my mind is not a great sign, because now I'll give you some context. Credit card balances as a way of loans on the books of banks is at about 1.4% right now. When was the last time it was in excess of 1%? Just before the 2008 financial crisis, it was at 1.2%. And that is when we saw credit card defaults. Now what happened? We were still largely insulated from the Lehman Brothers crisis, but yet there was a dent to India's growth. Now what happens is you're sort of purchasing your goods and services on credit without enough money in your bank accounts. Companies are not doing great. Job losses are high or on the anvil. You end up losing your job. This becomes bad debt for a bank. A bad debt is equal to an NPA. Right. So we saw 1.2% on the books of banks as credit card dues just ahead of 2008, and almost 30% of those resulted in defaults. Right now, we are at 1.4%. Now, since 2019, and remember 2019 is when India's consumption story started dwindling a little bit. Not too many people wrote about it or spoke about it, and thereafter there was 2020, the global pandemic, and whatever blame was to be squarely put on any reduction in economic activity was put squarely on the pandemic. But troubles had started brewing in 2019, and 2019 credit card dues were about 1% of the bank's total loans. Now, it has gradually increased to 1.4%. So, it sort of augurs not very well in favor of the consumption story, to my mind. Rather, this need to stay afloat with goods and services that you need to purchase for which you don't have enough money. So, instead of seeking a personal loan which comes at a high interest rate, you are financing your requirements through credit. And yeah, 5% Indians holding credit cards is still a large number. So, I wouldn't read too much into only 5% Indians owning credit cards. I think given an average population of 1.4 trillion is our population right now. 140 crores is our population. Now, each family, let's say with even 4 people, 2 minors, perhaps actually in rural area more than 4 members, but many minors, many single incomes. So the single income population in India is in any case, bread earners in the country would be no more than about 20% of the population. Right. So 1 out of every 4 bread earners owning a credit card, to my mind, is a fairly large number.
Right. It's definitely more than the number of people, the percentage of people who invest in stock markets, which still remains at 2%. It is more than the number of people who have insurance policies in this country. It is roughly the same number as the number of people who have insurance policies in this country. So it's a huge number. Let's not forget that. The only question is that, when the percentage is so low, but the dues keep rising. So what is going on over there? The other question I want to ask you, Karthik, is this. The other way of looking at it is that consumption, they say, did grow over the course of the last 1 year because of, a benign interest rate regime over the course of the last 1 year, which sort of got jacked up, with the birth of this year, and that's showing on the growth, during the course of the year, hoping for rate cuts in the last quarter of this year or later, doubtful on that. Fact of the matter is that inflation growing along with consumption also means that you are buying the same amount of things with the same amount of money, but your credit card dues keep going up because the cost of things have just gone up.
Absolutely. So consumption also increasing over the last 1 year, like you said, is maybe the same or reduced amount of consumption, but consuming goods and services at a higher price. So is the case with credit cards. So is there an absolute increase in consumption, or is there a dollar value increase in consumption? So similarly, if you're buying, like you said, if you're buying those same goods and services on credit rather than with cash, then obviously the credit card balances also swell up in a percentage to inflation. Now, inflation last year, and very rightly pointed out, last year we were seeing inflation in the range of about 6%, 6.5% upwards. It reduced to what, 6.1 or something. This year we are targeting about 4%. But credit card Y-on-Y increase between April 2022 and April 2023 is exactly 7%. So it's pretty much in line with inflation and nothing else.
Right. In fact, you track inflation, you see how the credit card spends have gone up. Another question, this is a tangential one, being a devil's advocate question. They say, as India progresses towards being a developed economy, greater urbanization, there is something called as credit worthiness. And everybody's credit worthiness has to be measured. In the US, from your social security number onwards, everybody's credit worthiness is measured, tracked. When you want to go take a home loan or an auto loan, you're clearly told at what interest rates that you'll be getting it under. Whereas as far as India is concerned, largely unorganized when it comes to identifying credit worthiness. You have like startups and individual evangelistic people trying to give you a credit score. But the fact of the matter is that greater credit card usage and greater penetration of credit card also means more organization in the credit worthiness of the Indian market.
No doubt. So CIBIL is, I think, the only rated agency tasked with identifying CIBIL score or credit worthiness.
Yeah.
Right. Now, unfortunately in India, just given your credit worthiness, you cannot negotiate your rate of interest for a loan that you take from a bank. Unlike how it happens in the US or even the UK, developed economies, where if your credit worthiness is high and even if the loan amount that you seek is low, you have a better negotiating power. In this case, unfortunately, that privilege is given only to corporate loans and industries which take multiple hundreds of crores of loans from banks. For example, going back to the Go First story, I think Go First would have been able to negotiate a better than market interest rate on its loan that it took from these 4 banks that we mentioned. Right. In the case of individuals, you may have a great credit score, Krishna, but when you go knocking at a bank's door to get an auto loan, I know you've been wanting to buy a car for a very long time, or a home loan which you're not interested in. But when you go knocking, even if the value of that loan is high, you may want to buy a penthouse in the sector that you live in Noida, which may cost you 2.5, 3 crore rupees. But that large a volume of loan, despite a great CIBIL score, because you don't have any other loans on your books, is not going to give you any bargaining power.
Yeah.
Right. But a corporate entity, let's say even wanting to take a 20 crore rupee loan, going to a bank will be able to negotiate the rate better.
Corporate entities have bargaining power after they default on the loan as well.
Absolutely. And they are the ones who default more, and we are the ones who are sort of funding that growth for them.
Yeah, incredible. And, just one last thing. Are you also, are we at that stage where, those fears regarding credit cards, those irrational use of credit cards, and irrational issue of credit cards? If you see these, I talk to analysts, how come the credit card spends are going up so much? 2008, you're talking about the defaults, but you see the way credit cards were handed out like candy in 2008 is not the case anymore today. So there is more vigilance from the part of banks, and the entire banking ecosystem as to who is given what credit card and what is the limit that they have on the credit card. Are you looking at a more evolved credit card market in this country as we go by?
So I'll tell you, you're right. So, I think what I agree with there is the limit on credit cards. But you go to a mall, you go even to an airport, right? Or you pick up any unknown number ringing on your phone. There are people still offering you credit cards. I'm not sure they know your credit worthiness, but they're still offering you credit cards. I think what banks are still trying to do is they're trying to elicit responses to credit card offers. So they will call you, they will hound you, they will get you to fill up a form. If nothing else, at least they have your phone number and your email ID, through which they could then possibly check through CIBIL what your credit worthiness is and then decide to hound you further or not. Right. But I think banks also try to test waters. The uninitiated who don't have a credit card or don't have a loan yet, there's no way for their CIBIL ranking to reflect anything, anything alarming about them one way or another. So banks would start with a small credit worthiness of, let's say, 8,000 rupees, 12,000 rupees, 15,000 rupees, and test waters. Now, if you continue to pay your dues on time, the banks will keep increasing your credit limit as your life cycle as a customer continues with that particular bank or that credit card issuer. But the RBI has also become a little guarded in that sense to, let's say, kill what we saw as neobanks. These were banks that did not have physical offices. These were neobanks which were offering credit services, banking services, especially credit cards. And we had the likes of Uni credit card and Slice credit card, which were very hot subjects till about 18 months ago. And these were credit cards being gifted to you in a nice box with a personalized note and a gift and discount coupons and whatnot. But the RBI has come heavily upon them. I think with fear of easy money being given on the back of venture capitalists to individuals like you and me to spend and perhaps default on, and those defaults accruing to the books of the neobanks, which don't really have brick and mortar outlets to go and sort of grab their collars
by.
So that entire story is also sort of, it hasn't given the kind of offtake to the credit card industry as it could have. For right or wrong, we don't know. I think this was something that was
That's a good point to make. I was about to say right or wrong, Karthik, but we live in a country which looked at credit as something that's not good.
Yeah.
Aaj nakad, kal udhar. Is the country that we come from. And here we are with more than 2 lakh crore rupees of credit card dues, and that's dues. We're looking at more than 1.2 lakh crore rupees of spends apart from that. You're put together, Indians have gone out and have spent more than 3 lakh crore rupees, for which they paid for 1 lakh crore and yet to pay for 2 lakh crore rupees. It's incredible. And, we'll have to wait and watch as to how Indians take to credit cards going forward. I remember, just 20 years ago, or even 2008 during the financial crisis, it was, the trepidation of, and then people chopping down their credit cards because they can't just stop using them. That's the kind of, martial law that you have to impose on yourself to make sure you control your credit card spends. But clearly it's not working so far to more than 2 lakh crore rupees worth of dues. We'll have to see how that pans out. But we will move on here on the show to something that's been making all the headlines over the course of the last week. And we're trying to break it down in terms of what it means for business, what it means for trade and commerce. And we're talking about India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's grand tour of the US and Egypt. But first, we'll begin with the all-important US, India's largest trading partner by a mile. And in 2019, India's largest trading partner, the United States of America, slapped tariffs and high tariffs on crucial Indian goods like steel and aluminum. And in retaliation, India too slapped duties on 25 American-made products. And now, but I'm going to stop before we go. That was during Trump era. That was a time when Trump called India a tariff king, so to speak, and said that that's the reason why Harley Davidson's did not sell in India. Harley Davidson had to wrap up, eventually had to wrap up their operations in India. That was then 2019. We are in 2023. We had a great bilateral visit, meeting between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. Now, what has that resulted in? That has resulted in trade barriers being taken down to start with. We're yet to get a finality on what the trade deal between the US and India looks like. But for now, we're beginning with the breaking down of some of those trade barriers. India has removed the duty on 8 American goods that are being imported in India. That includes apples, which is the famous Washington apples. 1,400 Washington apple growers will be very happy that their apples can come to India duty free. There is also walnut or akhroat. There is badam. There is and 8 products, so to speak, in which these boric acid, diagnostic reagents, all these materials used in diagnostics. All of these 8 products in which the duty has been removed, and the trade barriers have been brought down. Karthik, if not anything, this is a good sign of things to come.
I think only that. But yeah, I'll let Amit come into the details. Yes. But US and India, and I'm not just talking Biden era or Trump era or even George Bush era, Barack Obama era. I'm saying in general, US has seen trade with India with suspicion. Look at what used to happen with WTO, even during the Vajpayee government's time with the late Arun Jaitley as finance minister. We always had trouble because we would, they would want us to remove our farm subsidies to ensure fair trade between the rest of the world and India. And India said that this is not something that, that India is keen to do, and those subsidies are important for India's farm sector. But cutting to 2019, of course, at that time, remember, we were right smack in the beginning of season 2 of the Narendra Modi administration in the center, and 5 years of talking about, talking about Make in India, yet to kick off, Startup India, Stand Up India, yet to show its real colors, and the whole coinage of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance, still just brewing in the minds of top political leaders in India. Of course, those got announced a year later in 2020 when the pandemic hit, and we realized that we needed to be, independent of imports from China and imports from rest of the world. So, so our reason for creating these export duties first for steel and aluminum were primarily because these were critical raw material requirements to go into our industry. And we don't want anybody to have a free pass at them. And because of this increase in our duty structure on these two critical components for India's manufacturing, US did not take to it very kindly, and India then had to restrict free trade of US products also into India. And then these 25 items, out of which 8 have now, I think, in a show of solidarity with the business ties of with US, are now getting done away with. So Amit could help us with the details on these 8 items.
So duty has been done away with on apples, walnut,
California almonds,
both the roasted almonds and the
other ones,
and
walnut.
The sabut almond.
But curiously, the reason the US had given to impose duty on 25% on steel products and 10 on aluminium was national security against India. Imagine that. So in retaliation, India had basically imposed duties on 28 American products. Only 8 have come down. I do not know whether, it's not clear whether steel and aluminium also basically the duties are coming down, and this will come down in the next 90 days. So that is the details on it. But yeah, consumer goods that you get in the malls from America will be cheaper.
Definitely, and what really caught my eye was the fact that diagnostic reagents, which are materials used in diagnostics services, there will be no duty on them. I thought that's fascinating.
And this was going at a 20% duty.
Exactly.
This was going at a 20% duty. So I think the list of 8 includes chickpeas, which had attracted a 10% duty, import duty.
I love hummus, so that's going to make hummus really cheap.
Lentils, 20% duty.
Our own dal becomes cheaper, thank you very much.
Well, do we really need to import dal from the US? I'm not too sure of that.
I wonder what kind of lentils are they we're talking about.
Chickpeas for that matter. I mean, I think we are fairly okay on chickpeas.
Fair enough.
So hence, I thought maybe it's just a show of goodwill rather than it really impacting anything back home. Almonds at 7 rupees a kg, shelled almonds at 20 rupees per kg. These are the duties which are going to get removed, right? Then you had, of course, walnuts being imported at 20%. Washington apples, fresh apples at 20%, boric acid at 20%, and diagnostic regions at 20%.
Fascinating. We have Mr. Rakesh Karthik also joining us on this broadcast. Rakesh ji, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on this morning show. We're just talking about everything from almonds to apples, on which, from America, from which the trade barriers have been removed. Great signs as far as, arriving at that all-important trade deal is concerned, Rakesh, because that's the only thing we haven't heard about, the US-India trade deal.
Morning, Krishna. I think it sets the tone immediately after the visit is over that, we mean business, and actually it's being translated into ground action. But remember, someone like Elon Musk would be watching these duty cuts with some amount of hope and excitement and anticipation. So in that sense, that's the big one that possibly, everyone is looking at, which may or may not happen immediately. But yes, it sets the right context. It says, that the visit was very high on optics, it was high on intent, but it's being followed by some ground action. So in that sense, these items, 8 of them, may not be significant in terms of large trade volume, but they have some sense of symbolism and some consumer play. So to that extent, it's welcome. And I do see that over the next few weeks and months, when top bureaucrats in the two governments sit together to really decode and bring to ground and fruition the real outcome of the visit. At the macro level, this visit has gone very well, and to my mind, a couple of very big takeaways. One is the entire sentiment in this visit, Krishna and Karthik, was led by the business sentiment, right from the word go. The first meeting with Elon Musk to the dinner that the state dinner had maximum participation from the world of business and and finance. In that sense, that sentiment has been sustained, and it is the big takeaway. Of course, the other important takeaway is that Mr. Modi, brand Modi, gets some amount of endorsement from the thought leaders, the Nobel laureates, and the rest, which also has its own import. But it's the business. As we keep saying, it's the economy that is at the cornerstone of the relationship between the two. And it merits iteration that the excitement about this visit is as much about Modi and Biden personal chemistry. It is as much about, the fact that India is the fastest growing economy, and there are interests between India and US on the economic front that need to converge and collaborate for a larger global good. So everything is right about the visit as of now, but there would be irritants on the technology transfer. There would be challenges on the duty cuts. As we mentioned, Elon Musk would be looking with some amount of hope. So those are things that need to be watched as we go along. Brilliant outplay of from an Amazon to a the microchip company. There are so many announcements of intent, but it's easier said than done. We do have challenges here in India in terms of ease of doing business. Someone was pointing out to me the number of clearances still required are phenomenal, and when the big statements are made by big leaders, they need to be followed up. And the ground level clearance, if I can use that phrase, from an automobile sector is not easy, because clearances go right deep down to the parshad, the counselor, when it comes to putting the electric pole at the factory site. I'm not getting into the bigger debate about land acquisition and all that. Those devils, we know we have not been able to mitigate them. But despite those challenges remaining, I think there's a large sense of optimism, and it is for government of India and the US administration to really follow it up with a lot of homework and bringing these small packets of change, as we have seen through these duty cuts.
Right. Rakeshji, I also want to ask you one more thing. India and US have also promised to resolve 6 WTO disputes, World Trade Organization disputes. I mean, from the time, I'm just looking at it, in 2019, you had the US President Donald Trump calling India the tariff king, so to speak. From that to this, it's as if like the India-US relations have been brought back to parity, especially when it is relating to trade and commerce.
Well, I mean, it's a stated intent. I really don't know how it pans out actually when you go to WTO, because there are some entrenched vested interests, as Karthik was pointing out, and both from Kamal Nath as the Commerce Minister to Arun Jaitley, who both of them did a great job. These challenges need to be navigated because there are individual interests. How does India, any government? I mean, personally, I'm against subsidies, but the view that you do away with subsidies to give an advantage to European, farmers versus Indian farmers. How do we mitigate them? There are inherent challenges, but the core sentiment, Krishna, to my mind, at the end of the visit and right from the start of the visit till the end, is that there is a flexibility. You rightly articulated Donald Trump's inflexibility when it came to Harley Davidson. Imagine the most powerful man in the world getting fixed, if I can use that word, on one particular product, Harley Davidson. It became the reference point for the relationships between the two countries. It's not that Donald Trump was any less bullish on India, especially with this chemistry for Modi, but that's how American companies and American administrations work hand in hand, something that government of India has to learn, and Indian political spectrum has to come to understand and acknowledge, and not feel wary about governments of the day, so to say, tom-tomming their businesses in global arenas. This is the era of geoeconomics, and that is geopolitics today. Economics leads the global agenda. So we must learn from the US, the way they position their companies' interests, from the farm sector to the agriculture to technology to defense, and work very closely with them. Imagine we have had our own run-ins with, governments of the day signing pacts with companies, even when it's a government-to-government deal. We do remember what happened with Rafael with the French administration. It was a G2G deal. Despite that, it ran the whole course of controversy. Unfortunately, it has ended somewhere now. But there's a lot of learning to see how respective global administrations drive their interests globally, driving their businesses upfront.
Right. Fascinating. Rakesh, please stay with us. We're going to discuss more as well as we take this forward. I'm going to take this to Amit quickly. Amit, talk to us. You have 8 goods right now from where duty has been removed. As we are discussing, there is no finality on what this means. But right now, all this means is that this feels positive. This clearly shows great intent from both sides. And you're talking about a trade partner, of nearly $130 billion, India's largest trade partner. From your perspective, you've seen the course of events that we're discussing from Donald Trump to Biden over here. Say what you want about Biden. The fact is that, with this visit, we've sort of, brought things back into balance.
Taking on from what Kharsa said, it is setting the standard, and what is more to come. It is 8 right now. Let's see what more are coming, and that is what the likes of Elon Musk are looking closely at. And 2, I am pretty optimistic on the hurdles to basically setting up these plants, whether it's Micron or Applied Materials, coming up simply because probably we are in election year. So they will probably try to get things done faster than usual. And
Karthik
that is on the optimistic side.
Karthik, would you agree with that?
No, I think I agree with Amit. Election year, definitely you need some MOUs to really translate into real contracts, and some real contracts to translate into real dollars flowing in. But I think the runway is too short for that. So that is my only disagreement. I don't think a plant can be set up. The land issues, labor issues, even in a city like Gujarat, can be resolved that quickly that Micron is able to set up its plant and start getting the dollar inflows until we hit election
because not everything is chickpeas and lentils and almonds and walnuts, is it? Other things are going to require, greater investment and, greater time and gestation periods that we're talking about. Rakeshji, one last thing I wanted to ask you. After all of this, all I can think of is what happens to that US-India trade deal, the long-awaited US-India trade deal?
I think it would be put on the fast forward, but these things take a lot of time because a lot of bureaucratic work is involved, and you get into the nitty-gritty.
I'm asking this question because are you seeing it happen sooner before the elections? Maybe.
I doubt. And the US-India trade deal is not an election issue. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, neither is a big ticket project coming to India. The largest sentiment that Modi was received very well, and he took on the democracy debate up front with Biden endorsing him in public domain, are the carryaways for the election year. And the largest sentiment that the two most powerful country in the world, US, the 2 largest democracies are getting together, and what I call and repeat double democratic dividend is there available for the Indian electorate. It has to be very, very macro when it comes to election issues, when it comes to Indo-US relationships. But there is an agenda stated forward, and I think the trade deal will also see the light of the day. Probably the first thing once the elections are done.
Right, staying with the Prime Minister, Rakeshji, quickly, I'm going to take this across to his visit to Egypt, where he signed a strategic pact with Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the president of Egypt. He was welcomed in Egypt by the Prime Minister of Egypt. Rakeshji, you're talking about 3 memoranda of understanding, MOUs being signed in the fields of agriculture, archaeology, and antiquities. Beg your pardon. Agriculture, archaeology, and antiquities. We're looking at more partnerships in renewable energy as well. This is a fascinating partnership as well as in Egypt and India, something that goes back a long way in history and continues to remain vibrant.
Absolutely. I think you put it right, but I think the bigger import, Krishna, if I may say so, is the political import from Egypt. Right after the noise that Obama made rightly or wrongly, about the Muslims in this country, though are completely unwarranted to my mind. He has his own track record, as Nirmala Sitharam rightly pointed out. The visit right after US and a Muslim state, receiving and giving him the highest order, this order, civil order to the Indian Prime Minister, followed by a strategic tie-up announcement, is significant. His visit to the mosque and the way he was received sets the tone again, in terms of the overall imagery that brand Modi has for the election year. Getting the specifics of the strategic arrangement with them, I think India is trying to work with Egypt at the back end, which may not be at the front end, on counterterrorism, and is working, at the G20 level, trying to build a larger narrative for the developing economy vis-a-vis developed economies on food security, climate change. These are three very, very convergent areas. And remember, Egypt is trying to play a greater role in G20, and India is truly enabling that. And at the heart of it, Egypt's demand with India is also, it's made a pitch to get an additional membership of the BRICS. So that is going to be truly to Egypt's interests. India can only play a limited role to my mind, but it can play an enabling role in getting an additional country like Egypt to the BRICS. So G20 potential candidature for BRICS, and the overall, semantics of Modi's visit to a Muslim-dominated state in Egypt and the way he's been received, and followed by these specific, tie-ups and the strategic announcement in the public domain should really go well when he's, back in India today, and the way he's, received from the context of the US visit to the Egypt visit. And remember, I think if I'm right, this is the first visit by an Indian head of state after 1997. The Egyptian president, the leader was here for the Jan 23 Republic Day parade.
Correct.
But it only shows that we are on a certain very, very strong, robust trajectory when it comes to building that relationship.
All right, Rakesh Kar, our group editor for Business and Economy, joining us with the perspective. Thank you, Rakesh ji, for joining us on this Business Plus morning. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here on Business Plus. Thank you to all those who've tuned into this broadcast. This is KrishnaKumar signing off. Thank you, Karthik and Amit Ranjan, as always, for being in the studio and bringing us all those stories and all those perspectives and analysis. With that, we wrap things up, but you don't go anywhere. Keep watching News 9 Live.
BrahMos, stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus.